When I was a young boy, my family used to watch a show called Days of Our Lives. There used to be one character in that show called Stefano. Actually, let me tell you how the show started. The show usually had an intro called, it had a very nice intro. Our lives are like the sands of the hourglass. So are the days of our life. Today's show is going to be an interesting show. If someone told you about Napoleon Bonaparte or any European history, and he didn't mention the French Revolution, he told you half the story. Today, I'm going to tell you what really shaped the world. French Revolution, if you don't know about French Revolution, you don't know about world history. My name is Moses, and welcome to Musa Theories. Let's begin. Today, it's an interesting topic, the French Revolution. How did it start? But first, before we talk about the French Revolution, let's talk about the American War of Independence. So the American War of Independence was a fight between the Americans and the British when the Americans wanted independence from the British. So for this to happen, you really need international forces. So one of the international forces helping the Americans were the French. So the French heavily invested in the American War of Independence. But for this happening, guess what happened? France became bankrupt. But the soldiers who were helping Americans fight the British went back to France. In 1789, that's when we see the beginning of the French Revolution. So how did it actually start in France? But remember, it was instigated by the American War of Independence. So the French Revolution started when the King Louis XVI called the Estates Generals. Let me explain what the Estate Generals are. In today's language, probably in your country, you'll probably call them MPs. But remember, at that time in the French hierarchy, there were three groups of people. There was the clergy, the nobles, then the third estate. Who were the third estate? The third estates were like professionals, doctors, engineers, nurses, anyone in business, and the peasants, the poor people. The nobles were the people, the king, the counts, the marquis, all those guys who were working in the government, or the royals. Then we have the clergy, basically the church. The church in France in that era used to run the show. So before the actual happening of the French Revolution, literally all the power rested between the clergy and the nobles. The clergy controlled basically almost all the land in France and the nobles. So basically, the clergy had 50% of the land, 30% was owned by the nobles. Then the remaining 20% was spread among the third estate, who were considered the poorest by then. With the third estate seeing this was unfair to them. So, number one cause of the French Revolution, as I said, was the calling of the Estates Generals on the third estate. When they came to the meeting with the king, they were looking for solution to solve the financial crisis in France. So when King Louis called this meeting, it really wasn't even fixing the financial crisis. They all brought up all the problems France was going through at that time. The king was so pissed off that he cancelled the whole meeting. So in this meeting happening, the third estate, basically the MPs then literally moved next to something called the tennis court. This is widely known as the tennis court oath. So here, all the third estate met, literally the MPs where they met, and they decided they will not stop fighting for the freedom of France, literally for France to become a constitutional republic. But the king got a whim of this. So as the king was getting the whim of this, he told his brother to be renting the tennis court so that these people could not be meeting. But anyway, they continued meeting. So this is a very significant moment in the French Revolution called the tennis court meeting. So another cause of the French Revolution was the storming of the Bastille. The storming of the Bastille was literally the, how they call it, the catalyst or the actual gaslight. It was the spark of the French Revolution. So for people who don't know the Bastille was basically one of the largest prisons in France. This is where all the armory and all the political prisoners were being kept. So anyone who was going against the King Louis XVI by then, was being put in a prison called the Bastille. But when the French Revolution was happening, there was literally less than 10 prisoners there. But this building was literally a symbol of oppression to the people of France. So them attacking this place was like, we are taking the power from the king. Then there was also the march of women to the palace. So these women were from the market. If I remember correctly, they used to call them the poissade. Literally in French, the poissade were the market women, literally who were selling fish. But I know it's the poissade, they were literally muscular women. They went to complain to the palace about the rise, the food prices, especially bread. There's this joke that goes on. The king's wife then was called Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette, when the women came to march at the Versailles Palace, it's a joke, it's not confirmed. Historians are still debating if it's true or false. It is said, she said that if bread is expensive, why don't you buy cakes? Which is very satirical. But looking at this march of women, it actually led to the beginning of women rights. This is, we see like now women starting to fight for their rights. Then as we continue, some of the causes of the French Revolution were the extravagant nature of King Louis and Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was, she is widely known for being one of the most extravagant women on earth. And the French people really didn't like her. First, to begin with, she wasn't French. I think she was Austrian. Because remember those days, monarchies used to, for them to strengthen their ties, they had to intermarry between them and other monarchies just to strengthen themselves. So Marie Antoinette was like a figure to the people who just showed extravagancy. So the people were really tired. So as we continue, the French Revolution was really becoming a menace as people were now trying to remove the king from power. As the Estates Generals were meeting, this is when we see like the growth of what we call now political power. There was a group of the Jacobins, then there was a group called the Girondins. This was like political parties among the Third Estate. So, as we continue, this is what happened when they was trying to remove the king. As the political parties were coming up, the king was actually giving up some of the powers. Some constitutional amendments were being given, but the people were really they did not want anything to do with the king. So it reached to a point whereby the king was just a political figure. The king wasn't making like all those kinds of decisions that he used to make, because the Third Estate had literally taken over, but the king was still there. But as we continue, the Jacobins, the Girondins were really not happy about this going on. And then we also had people like someone called Marat. So this is also we start seeing the role of media in politics and how it shapes politics. So Marat used to have a newspaper called L'Ami du Peuple. If you translate that from French, it literally means the friend of the people. So Marat used to publish these articles in this newspaper, which led to people being killed. This ushered in a moment in the French Revolution called the Reign of Terror. Literally, in 1 month, about 1,500 people were killed. So, if anyone was being like a loyalist to the king, or anyone who was trying to support the king, and Marat had like how do I call it? Like had an idea of what's going on, he will write an article about you supporting the king, and the next day you will be executed. And during the French Revolution, the best form of execution was literally known as the guillotine. The guillotine was started by someone called Dr. D. the Guillotine. Literally, this was a piece of metal put up, and your neck will be put in some carved kind of wood, and the metal, which was like a razor, will literally land on your neck, and your head will drop on a basket. It was called the guillotine. People were calling it the painless death. I wonder how they'll figure out how it's painless if they didn't go through it. But basically, this guillotine was used to execute anyone who was supporting the king or the royals. This was the order of the day. So as we continue, in this whole commotion of the French Revolution, one big mistake the king tried to do was try to escape with the wife. They tried to go to Austria, whereby there were other forces who were trying to come back to France and take the power from the Third Estate. So, in the process of the king trying to escape, he was found. They found and they took him back to Paris. So, as they were taking him back to Paris, what happened is there was a decision that was made. The decision was, we want to execute the king, which literally happened. King Louis XVI was executed by the guillotine right there and then. And this cemented was one of the beginning of France now changing from a monarchy to a republic. But when all this is happening, it doesn't mean like France's problems was ending. It was actually not really ending. It was becoming more and more. So like I said earlier, after the king dying, there was now the beginning of the Reign of Terror. This Reign of Terror was being seen as there were two things were happening. There was internal fights in France, which was the people who wanted to bring back the monarchy, and the fight between the people who wanted France now to become a republic. So France was fighting literally two wars. One internal between themselves, people who wanted a monarchy and people who wanted a republic. And then outside, there were people who supported the monarchy, who wanted to come back to France and still fight and bring back the monarchy. So, as all this is going on, a new government is formed during this Reign of Terror, whereby we are seeing the Jacobins and the Girondins. During this time is whereby we see the beginning of enlightenment, where people are seeing like, you know what, we can be free. We really don't need to be under any king. Like, we need constitutional rights. This is where we also see things like today, like constitution, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Because remember, during the French Revolution, religion was taken out completely. During this time, during the Reign of Terror, they went to the, how they call it, what is famously known today, the Cathedral of Notre Dame. They removed it as a Catholic church, and they put something like a woman there, then they call it the Goddess of Reason. This is the beginning to them, the beginning of reasoning, whereby you are allowed to choose your own religion. So France was like, no more Catholic Church. Now we enter the phase of the reign of terror. This was a terrible, terrible time in France. And here is where I also mentioned, you'll be asking me, why am I covering the French Revolution? How does it even connect to Africa? French Revolution literally set the pace for the whole of Europe and also affected Africa, which I'll come to in the conclusion. So let's talk about the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror, this was a time whereby basically the parliament by then was running France. There were so many executions, there were also so many wars. When I said if someone told you about Napoleon Bonaparte and didn't tell you about the French Revolution, he told you the half story. The Reign of Terror literally is the one that gave birth to Napoleon. Because at this point, the parliament really needed to prove to the people that we are actually winning all the external wars. Like there is no one coming in. One of the fights Napoleon was fighting was the one in Egypt, which we will come to later in later episodes, whereby he defeated the Mamelukes in Egypt, which whereby when he went back to France, he was taken as a hero. Like one person people were looking up to was Napoleon because he was the face of victory. But at this point, he was just a regular officer in the French army. Something to note, which I will also talk about in a future episode, which you should all look forward to, is when I'll talk about the rise and fall of Napoleon, of which this episode will be a prerequisite for that episode. This episode will lay foundation for the episode of the rise and fall of Napoleon coming in future. Look out for that. So when we look at the directory government, their main aim was to spread the revolutionary ideas. So what were the revolutionary ideas? It was liberty, fraternity, and equality. In French, they call it liberté, fraternité, and equalité. That's where it came from. That's why they have the tripartite colors. The flag has the blue, the white, and the red. Liberty, fraternity, and equality. So if you hear equality in any constitution, just know all this started during the French Revolution. Also, something to mention is if there was no French Revolution, there would have been no World War I, because the cause of events was the French Revolution starting, leading to the Reign of Terror. From the Reign of Terror, we see the Directory government. From the Directory government, we see the rise of Napoleon. After the rise of Napoleon, we see all the commotion Napoleon is causing, all the wars in Europe, which led somehow, which I will connect this in the Napoleon episode, the assassination of Archduke Franz, which led to World War I. So, for you to understand world history, one thing you have to know, like seriously have to know, is French Revolution, which I'm breaking it down for you right now. So during the Reign of Terror, it was actually led by Robespierre, who was like the leader of the Jacobins Club, which was the political party then. So he was having so many executions then. So this became too much. Then we see there was a short period of a time, they called it the Thermodian Age. I don't know if I'm getting the words correctly. But the Thermodian Age was the one which came in and was like, no, this time for Robespierre, Maximilian Robespierre, we are not really feeling it. So many people are dying. Remember when you are being called by the parliament, like there was no trial. People were just being executed for just being suspected of thinking about supporting the king. So during this Reign of Terror, we also see the execution of the king's wife, Marie Antoinette. She was executed during this Reign of Terror. So after all this happening, remember they still use the guillotine. After this, she was executed. Then we see the Thermodian age. Then we see the beginning of the directory government. And this directory government was literally put in power by Napoleon himself, because very many people wanted to bring back the king, but like remember, like when I say bring back the king, I'm not saying bring back the dead king, but they just wanted to continue that monarchy way of lifestyle of controlling France. So all these people were being taken care of by Napoleon. That's why there's this famous quote where Napoleon says it's called the whiff of grape shot. A whiff of grape shot is literally he fired cannonballs. Literally, to explain cannonballs, if you see like those old times, their version of a tank was a cannonball. Like this thing was so big. Once he was firing this thing at the people who were like trying to come and attack the directory government, literally it didn't go well for them. Napoleon got rid of them completely. So at this point, Napoleon was literally holding the French government. But remember, he was not at all in any decision making. He was just literally the boots on the ground. Something also to note, during the French Revolution, it led to the unification of some of the states, because at this point, other countries nearby France, they were all monarchies. The British was a monarchy. Germany was still a monarchy. Italy was a monarchy. So they were all seeing this will spread around. So they were literally supporting anyone in France who was against the French Revolution, because all the monarchies, they were all literally scared to death, because they knew, and even all of you know, once there's a protest in one European country, it literally spreads like wildfire, like serious wildfire. So during the French Revolution, we also see, like I said earlier, the beginning of enlightenment ideas. Some of the key guys we have to mention here were like some of the writers like Voltaire. These people had already started writing on freedom of speech, giving humans freedom. Like, the government doesn't need to be in all your business. The government needs to be basically providing services, security, providing just services for people, like, and making people's lives better. In the French Revolution, this was all what they were fighting for. But the biggest problem was the anarchy. That's why, literally, when you look at some countries, when there's a revolution, there's always that time, there's a phase whereby there's a fight. Like, from a revolution, when a revolution starts, doesn't mean things always go as planned. Because there's this famous quote from an African leader. I can't actually remember, but he said, "The tree of freedom is literally watered by blood." For you to see France where it is right now, the French Revolution had to happen. During the French Revolution, over 16,000 people were killed. There was so much blood spilled, including the king and even some of the people who were even supporting the French Revolution. Someone like Maximilien Robespierre, who was the leader of the Reign of Terror, literally was executed. And he was one of the biggest supporters of the French Revolution. So there's always those faces. And if you look, I'm going to teach you something like, because at one point Napoleon comes and organizes a coup. But for a revolution to happen, you literally need three things. One, you need the media. When I say the media, remember the story of Marat, L'Ami de Pape. That was the newspaper that was used to instigate the revolution. Two, you need guns. That's why they went and they stormed the La Bastille, because that was the French armory then. It was a prison, but it was also the French armory where most of the gunpowder was kept. Three, You need money. How did these people get money? Remember, the French Revolution was led by farmers, doctors, like everyone who was a professional. So they had to come together, pull up their resources. That's why people usually say the people are always stronger than the government, whether you like it or not. But only if united. At this point, the French people were united. They all had one common goal. We're getting rid of the king. They got rid of the king, yes, but at what cost? There was blood involved, there was money involved, there was peace. Peace was gone. As much as during the king's time, everything was so hard, but there was at least peace. But for them to move from one era to another era, things had to change. Now, let's talk about the directory government. This was like it was like more of a parliamentary system. There was like five at the top who were like the five governors to avoid dictatorship. They did not want the coming back of the dictatorship style of rule whereby the king made all the decisions. So there was five people who made decisions. Then there was another 200 and something who were there to sign laws, to ratify laws, basically the parliament. Then the parliament had other members like 500. So there was basically 700 members in the directory government. But the directory government had some weaknesses. It was very corrupt, and the people of France literally did not trust it at all, at all. In this whole commotion, like I said earlier, Napoleon happened. Napoleon was looking at all this, was like, what's going on here? There was like a vacuum of power. France needed a leader. Remember, you just don't move from a king to a parliamentary system just like that. There has to be something stable. Napoleon saw this weakness. It was, I will say, a political maneuver whereby he saw this and he himself, the whiff of grapeshot, after seeing that he could manipulate the masses, whereby he was seen as a star, he decided, you know what? I'm going to overthrow the directory government. And literally, with the help of his brother, he overthrew the directory government. So, like I said earlier, for someone to tell you about Napoleon, you have to mention the French Revolution. Because the French Revolution, to me, was the birth of a civilized Europe. It didn't come easy because Napoleon had so many wars, but he took over France and decided to become the emperor of France, and he took over everything. So, having known what the French Revolution is, which I've given you, it's literally a crash course of what the French Revolution is. The after effects were what we now know, a constitution, because during the French Revolution, it's what gave birth to now people writing constitution, the Bill of Rights, your freedom of worship, which we all love so much, then the freedom of the press, which is being fought for everywhere in the world right now. So, as we finish up with the French Revolution, which led to the beginning of Napoleon, this is how the French Revolution shaped Europe. The French Revolution led to the beginning of Napoleon. The French Revolution led to the unification of Germany and Italy. For most people don't know, Germany and Italy were not just countries as we know them right now. They were small city-states before they became what we know now them. Because in Germany there was a country called Prussia, which was led by Otto von Bismarck. There were so many other states, Bavaria, of which whereby right now you can see like the teams like Bayern Munich. In Italy also there were the small states. There was Sicily, Napoli. Like you see those great systems like Milan. Those cities were literally city-states. So because all these city-states were all they all were led by a king. They were like, no, if we see what France has happened, our people will take over. So let's all come and unite and become one country so that France cannot take over or any other country cannot come and attack us. So the French Revolution led to the unification of Germany and Italy so that they can have a chance of becoming something big. And also, as I conclude, the French Revolution also is the birth of what we see today, the European Union. Although we see Britain did a Brexit and they came out of it, but the French Revolution led to the foundations of the European Union you see today. So, as I finish up, this episode was a prerequisite of an upcoming episode, which we will see the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. Because after the French Revolution, Napoleon took over the government and declared himself the emperor. My name is Moses. Thank you for watching Musa Theories, and that was the French Revolution. Have a nice day.